Hello again, and welcome to another edition of the Magical World of G. Michael Vasey podcast series. And in this episode, I'm talking with house healer Tim Walter. Now, I've known Tim for several years, and he's helped me grow as a dowser and helped me in other ways as well as a house healer. And we've talked in the past about a number of topics, including house healing, but I've never really taken the time to explore what is house healing and why is it important. So today, that's the topic we start with before wandering off into all kinds of mysterious thoughts about the nature of reality and today's reality. Enjoy. Here's Tim. When I was looking at this apartment being built and trying to make a decision as to whether to buy it, one thing that influenced me, wrongly or rightly, was that there are two small earth energy lines in the vicinity, one of which runs through my living room, bedroom, daughter's bedroom, this office. Now, I assumed, maybe wrongly, that this was good for me to be in an energy line, sleeping in an energy line, living in an energy line. It's only like an 8 meter, it's a small one. And there's a pair of them. The other one runs kind of through the back garden area. So, if you were advising me 3 or 4 years ago and I stood out there thinking about buying this place, does the fact that an energy line runs directly through it have negative or positive connotations, or is it not as simple as that in a house healing context?
The simple answer is it's not as simple as that. But actually it's only one stage more complicated. And that is that you were fundamentally right. Your intuition was actually fundamentally right. That living in a place where you've identified an earth energy line can be very positive. Equally, they can be very negative. But it's all about the relationship between you as the observing aspect of the universe and the feature that you're finding, which in your case is the earth energy line. So if you are resonating at again, these words are not really appropriate, but they're the ones that we have to use to try to understand what we're talking about. But if you're resonating at a vibration that is slightly out of sync with that earth energy line, because you yourself are in a state of presence that is not overly happy, we use the emotional term happy, content, satisfied, all of those, those words to describe what we are, then the chances are that energy line is going to be out of sync with you. So you and it are out of sync. That is what causes the detrimental effects. Mm-hmm. It is part of the picture that's being presented by a person that is undergoing influences from within that are being expressed in their external environment, but those influences from within are ones that are not fulfilling their true selves. They're not actually in a harmonious place. They're not in where, let's say, the management would like them to be, quite frankly. I mean, that's the simple way of putting it. Now, that's not to say that that person actually is a bad person. It's not to say that person is necessarily going to become unwell, but the degrees and the way that their health and their emotional well-being manifests is dependent on their individual inner journey far more than it is on the external environment. So the external environment reflects what's going on inside. We cannot think of ourselves, when we're doing the house healing work, we cannot think of ourselves as just simply being a physical human being subject to the Newtonian laws of physics. The Newtonian laws of physics are absolutely brilliant and fantastic. Quantum science doesn't even really start to touch the surface. So all we have to do is to say, right, we accept that we can look at the world through a scientific objective viewpoint, but for the sake of this work, because we're going behind the scenes and tinkering in the mechanism of creation, we're going to have to put all of that to one side. Mm-hmm. What we look at is what's given to us in each moment, each time we access the energy of a space, analyze what's going on there, try to understand through intuitive process of connecting to the management, in other words, the engineers that have created our reality anyway, as to what is going on for the individual aspect of the universe that we call a person, in this case Gary Vasey, and what do the management, as those in charge, want tweaking, and therefore we try and act as the point of observation to allow the management to do the tweaking, which then affects your reality.
Yeah. So, as a house healer, how can you determine all of that in the case where, obviously you know me reasonably well at this stage, but if I was a total stranger, came in off the internet and said, "Hey Tim, do a house review for me," how then how are you able to do that when you don't know the person, you don't know the place?
What happens? We use a framework of questions. So we do the dowsing, which is the simple process of putting our intuitive abilities into a framework that allows us to ask questions that we receive either a yes or no response from the subtle realms, otherwise called the management upstairs, the spirit world, if you like. But it's also an aspect of us. So it's our intuitive aspect. Everybody can dowse.
Yeah.
But the framework, the house healing framework that we use, is one that allows us to logically go through a process of asking the questions that will elicit information back to us about the space, about the person. So your question of how do we access information when we don't know who the person is, we actually get to know aspects of the person through doing the dowsing, because we're actually making contact with information about the person that goes to make up the person. So we tend to find things that, what we can find is things that have influenced that person's development. So there can be traumatic instances from childhood in particular that have influenced the way that person's life script plays out, the way that person's life script develops, really the story of their lives. These incidents that occur when we're younger, when we're in the state of really being impactful, affect our lives. We know this stuff. I mean, this is basic psychology. It's not, anything woo in that sense. But this information can be picked up by dowsing. Because we can access the informational field from which we're all made.
Yeah, I guess the analogy for me would be that I now ask the lines routinely lots of questions with the rod, and I even utilize the rod in certain ways. So I will say, for example, okay, thank you, but today I'm only interested in type 4 lines. Please don't show me anything but type 4 lines, and now show me where the nearest one is and give me an estimate of how far away it is. And I know it sounds crazy to some people, but believe you me, 100% of the time I get accurate responses. So I'm assuming that you use the dowsing in exactly the same way, but with different questions.
I wouldn't say in exactly the same way, because actually every individual dowser dowses slightly differently. My dowsing won't be anywhere near as specific and precise as your dowsing, because you've been trained in working with science and categorizing, and
Right.
and you're fascinated by that kind of detail. That I put that to one side. I can't be doing with it. It's like, I'm sorry, but no.
Well,
but it's okay.
It's funny that you say that, Tim, but as I write this book, the one thing I've realized in writing the book, and, apologies to Rory if I'm misrepresenting him in any way, but I say in the book, Rory and I are both geologists and we're both scientists, and yet I don't really feel a need to understand what an earth energy line is at all from a scientific perspective. It just is. And I think I'm changing in that regard. Yeah.
It's really interesting because actually the question of what is this line, which is one that we all ask when we first come across them and we first start to interact with them. The question of what is this line? You go to a sacred site and you've got these amazing feelings that come from this invisible space. That's really important as we open up and start to develop and explore the earth energy. But actually, you do kind of you get to a stage where you do sort of accept that, well, actually, that's not the important thing. What you do with it is the important thing. So no, I mean Rory's work is really important. It's really important because it's categorizing, it's classifying, it's helping us all understand that these things are really solid. This is almost solid. There's a structure here. There's a reason. But I tend to urge people not to get too hooked on trying to understand what it is, because once you allow that to go to the side, you then start to, this is really interesting, because what does it mean about what I am? What am I? If this is doing something, how do I connect to it? Why is it here? Why am I able to connect to it? What does it mean if I actually change? Oh, hang on, no. So if I go into a site when I'm really pissed off and angry, what does that do? Well, you don't want to be connecting to this stuff when you're in that state. You just don't want to, because it'll come back at you and it will be absolutely bloody horrible. Now, that in itself is part of the process of learning that we're all going through at the moment. So what's happening right now for us as a species globally, do tell me if you don't want to go down this road, but
That's good.
Globally, what's happening is that we're beginning to we're beginning to recognize again the network and the interconnected nature of everything. And that includes our connection to Earth energy. We might want to call it the Earth energy grid. You call it the web of weird.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly is more, to me, it certainly is more like a web. And the web analogy stands, which is fine. So as we discover this web, and more of us accept, yes, it's there, the presence is there, my God, that is going to change that web. It's going to change the way it feels to every single person from now on that discovers it. You talk about an 8-meter wide line being a small line. Mate, I'm dealing with lines that are like this wide. That's what I work with. I'm not saying because it's a detailed thing or anything. It's just the scale of difference that you can find is huge.
Yes.
It's exactly like our energy system, our blood supply, and the meridians of our body, where you've got major arteries and major, whatever the other vessels are, right down to the small fields of capillaries that are tiny and almost all, cellular in each here. Now, so what I'm working with when I ask people to look for the little power center in their home, really is the kind of like the little capillary area down here. I'm not sure that Rory's categorization as yet has got to that tiny scale of existence, but it will, and that's fine.
Well, to be fair to Rory, I think perhaps he's moved on as well from doing the strict classification and scientific rigor. I think he's moved on to working with the nodes and trying to get groups of people meditating, and so I guess he's gone through the same transition in his own way. I'm speaking for him, but I would think that that's what's happened, and I think we all do. I mean, I think you come from a place, and I'm a trained scientist. He's a trained scientist, and so initially, what is this? Why is it here? What is it? What causes this? And then eventually you just say to yourself, actually, I don't really think I care, because I'm aware of the broader implications are huge. And that's where the value and the meaning is. It's not what is it? It's, what does it mean to me and humanity?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And this is the point where I was kind of working towards, which is as more of us wake up and recognize these lines. What happens in the first instance, and this is the phase that we're sort of entering now, is that the lines are picking up everybody's input, because there is no doubt that they are crucial to the reality that we experience individually and collectively. So at the moment, what we've got is a lot of people, and there will be more, connecting to these lines and working with them with intention. Now, the issue with this is that actually at the moment, unless I don't want to sound kind of elitist here, because this is not meant to be elitist, it's just a stage that we're going through. So the most important thing for any self-development on any path for each individual is to actually understand themselves and to understand their heart and to understand the power of love, to use a corny phrase. Now, most of the people that are interacting with the earth energy lines are doing so very well intentioned. The intention is absolutely fantastic, but they haven't done the inner work that says you interact with love, because it's got to be the love that goes into that system, into that web of weird that manifests the reality for everybody. You can't work with these lines and create the effect that you want to create based on your human ego-based judgment of somebody else being wrong. You can't say, well, I'm going to change this and go in and do the work. When I say can't, I mean you can, and that's what's happening, is that the web is being used from the ego-based perspective, not from the base of love. That's not to say that it won't be, and it's not judgmental. What I'm saying is there's an educational process that needs to go on to actually help people understand the importance of each individual working from their heart, which is fundamentally what we are as human beings. And that's our journey that we're on here collectively. But that's why we're going through the process of change and chaos that we are at the moment.
Yeah. It definitely is an ongoing evolutionary process, both at the individual level and at the every level above in terms of the group.
Yeah.
And like I said, before we even started, it's had a profound effect on me. I'm a different person. Well, insofar as you can be a different person, I'm a different person than I was a few years ago.
So am I. I'm completely different. Completely different. I mean, I was talking to my youngest son yesterday, and we were he's interested in the house heating work, in fact, but we were talking about some of the experiences that he had as he was growing up with me as a dad, and he expressed it that, well, you're a different person now, Dad. You're just completely different. You were stressed out of your mind. And and it's not an excuse for the way I behaved as a dad. I mean, I had a terrible temper with these poor kids, but I was so stressed by what I was doing, my job. I was in completely the wrong job for who I am. And so you have changed massively. Likewise, and to even think that I could sit here and talk about this sort of stuff in a public environment. I know it seems a very small thing for many people, but to me, talking in public of any level was actually physically difficult, because I used to, when I was a kid, I used to suffer with selective mutism. That's the medical diagnosis, which is simply that when you're in a stressed environment, you literally can't talk, even if you want to. Right? So at school, okay, I couldn't talk. I never answered a single question. I never put my hand up. I never did that because I couldn't bloody well talk.
Right. Good grief.
So the degree, right? Yeah. So it's amazing.
Back on house healing, it's not just earth energy lines that you're working with, is it? What are the sorts of forces and atmospheres are you working with?
We tend to break down the sections. We look at personal subtle energy. So we look at a person's chakra system and their auric field and remove attachments. We look at spirits. We look at other aspects of that kind of personality-driven, ghosts, that kind of personality-driven environment. So ghosts and trapped souls and that sort of thing. We talk to the guardian personality of each space, and that's really, really important, because we're asking their permission to go in and do the work. So there are personalities of, well, I call it the management. There are personalities there that are, as I say, in charge of creating our reality effectively. And part of that system is the Devic realm, and part of that is the guardianship of place. So we talk to them. We also deal with EMF, so electromagnetic frequencies. A lot of people are, troubled by that, and they can be adjusted with intent and with the connection to the management, just as other things can. Toxic lines, historical events that have taken place in the landscape, or historical events that have taken place in the house itself. So if you've got a divorced couple, for example, or you've got a house that is, this is the typical example, is that you've got what estate agents call divorce houses, where basically something has triggered divorce in the first occupants, and then that pattern just keeps recurring. I always think it's a little bit like the movie The Shining, where Jack, the protagonist, goes into that hotel and is just influenced and becomes
Yeah.
that old caretaker. Brilliant movie. But the influence of what has happened in a space is very real. It's tangible and it can be doused, and that's part of the story that we get given as house healers. There are all sorts of things. So, portals. We even look at off-world lines and ET interaction, and these days that is becoming more and more to the fore for some reason.
Interesting. I wonder why.
I think it's because we're basically preparing to step out. We're the Earth energy grid is not restricted to Earth, as you know. So the web that expands out into the universe, it has always been there. It will always be there. We, as a species, are preparing to step out into the wider world. In order to step out, the wider universe. In order to step out into that wider universe, we actually need to be given permission to do so by our intergalactic cousins, right? They don't want some yubs moving into their neighborhood, bottom line. So we have to develop in order to be able to be allowed to actually step out in the physical carbon-based form into that environment. And that means that actually our psyche has to change, and what we pick up in terms of what is in the subtle realms changes, it develops, it evolves. It's an ongoing story.
If I think about it, I'd never, until I really met you, I'd never really come across the concept of house healing at all, not in the way that you do it. Is it popular? Do you have a lot of clients, so to speak, and is it growing or?
I think the issue really is actually the label. The label house healing is one that people aren't familiar with. If I talk to you about interacting with one's reality or somebody else's reality with focused intent, connecting to the management, spirit, gods, whatever label wants to be put up there, you would have said, "Oh yeah, well, magic. That's what you mean. That's what I do. It's what I do." And yeah, it's all, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm very woolly and loose with my packaging systems. As far as I'm concerned, it's all the same thing. It's just a different collection of labels, and many of the religions are built on exactly the same thing. Another word for focused intent is simply prayer, right? So the way that we interact with the management, the way that we ask change to occur for somebody else is really through prayer. But we call it focused intent. We're saying, right, we're going to want to focus intent. We want to connect to the management. We're opening up and making ourselves available to be the portal through which the management works and affects somebody else's reality. So house healing as a concept, as a label, is very new. But it's not that new, because actually this very system has been in existence for decades. There was an organization developed in the 70s by a guy called Colin Bloy over here in the UK, an organization called Fountain International. And what Fountain International did was to basically go on site to a troubled town, like parts of London, for example, in the 70s, or even down to Brighton, which is a coastal town here in the UK. That used to get a lot of violence on bank holiday weekends in the 60s, so it continued through the 70s as well. And Colin Bloy would go down there to Brighton and focus love into the power centre of Brighton. And that happened to be at one of the major fountains, of sort of Victorian fountain, and so therefore he called his organisation Fountain International. He never set it up in a formalised way, but that process, which is fundamentally working with upstairs with positive, loving intent to affect a reality of a group of people or a place, that's fundamentally what house healing is. So it's been going for decades, but under a different kind of form. And what I do now is I teach the house healing process. I run a 10-month course, which is really a self-development course, because earlier on we talked about the importance of working on the heart and understanding yourself. So I take students through the how to douse the 50 section headings, understanding what the 50 section headings are providing you as a house healer, what the information is that they're telling us about the client, about the reality that needs to be, the management wants to be changed. And in doing that, through over the 10-month period, and the students do practical, dowsing, and it's experiential. It can be the only way that you teach this stuff. They learn an amazing amount about themselves and about the nature of who they are and about the nature of what a human being is and its relationship to the management upstairs. And it's a brilliant process. I find it both exhilarating when students are like, wow, this is amazing, this is life-changing, in exactly the same way that you and I have talked about. I also find it a little bit frustrating because I get frustrated at my inability to express things clearly enough for people to grasp it quickly enough. And I've now recognized that actually I have to just step back, say what I need to say at the time because it's coming through from the management, and allow people to assimilate information at their rate, and they will get it, eventually at some point. And that's the way it works. That's called life, isn't it?
So yeah, essentially, it is. It's like a magic course, actually, akin to the one that I took. The one I took was based around Kabbalah and Arthurian Celtic themes and ritual magic and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, the aim was, who are you? What are you? Learn about yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure whether it's true or whether it's just anecdotal, but as far as I understand it, above the Delphic oracle, all those thousands of years ago, was the saying that just said, know thyself.
Yeah.
And now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. You may well know. But
I thought it was.
Yeah, well, I'm going with, I think it's true. And that's the fun, if we want to ask what's the most important thing in our lives, it's that, know thyself. You've just got to know yourself in order for the inner world, the inner universe to settle into place. Acceptance is a huge part of that, accepting everything in the current and in the perceived past, understanding that actually our true nature is not this, as we know, and accepting that we're not going anywhere. Our reality, our consciousness is not going anywhere. It will always be, no matter what the external environment we inhabit.
Yeah, and I think that everybody has their own way finds their own way if they're asked or attracted or invited or stumble into it or whatever the mechanism is. And you see people on all kinds of different paths, but fundamentally, once you get into the nitty gritty and start exploring it, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So there's definitely something going on. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to kind of look at, the way that I look at it and constantly kind of readjust my perspective on it all, it really is to look at the work of Bruce Lipton, the biologist, when he talks about us as individual imaginal cells. So he relates everything to the body and to the structure of us as a collective presence. I took it to another extreme in a recent talk where I was trying to get people to shift their perspective on who they were, and I went down to the atomic structure level, and apparently we're made up of I think it's 27 octillion atoms. I think that's right. I might have got that wrong actually. Sorry, Gary. But basically, it's a number with 27 zeros, right? Which is fantastic because in the known universe there are only 200,000 million or something like that. Let's cut this bit out. Oh, I don't mind, leave it in. But basically, there are many more atoms that make us up than there are stars in the universe, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's a huge number, but what it means is that we're just this cloud of energy, this cloud of atoms that is basically taking different form at every single moment. That's not a human being. And when you start to think about, oh, okay, well, if you think about fractal patterns and the fact that reality is built on repeating patterns of simplicity, then actually, as an individual human being, we are just one of 7.5 billion souls on the planet at the moment. And therefore you've got the consciousness of the individual human being, you've got the consciousness of the 7.5 billion souls, and you've got, therefore, a consciousness of the wider environment. But also, if you go back the other way and you go down back through from the consciousness of the 7.5 billion souls to the consciousness of the individual, but you come down to the consciousness of individual cells as well, it's all just patterns of stuff. And therefore, when you hinge that into good old Eckhart Tolle's power of now, and you forget about time, and you just deal with the moment, then you see, well, you're a completely different being to what you thought you were. I don't know how we got onto that, but
No, but that's true. And I was also, as you were talking earlier, I was also thinking that in my explorations here, one thing that's become really apparent is that previous generations of humanity have not only been aware of this web, but they've known more about it than we do. And so I wonder if we haven't reached some kind of a critical juncture in human history here where, we're facing a bit of a dilemma, because the way we seem to be headed from a materialistic scientific perspective is towards more materialistic and more machine-man interface. And I found myself writing in the book the other day, I completely reject that notion. I think that it's completely the wrong direction. And I think there's a rebound going on where people are rediscovering that we are part of this planet. We're integrally connected to each other and to everything. And we need to explore that. And it's almost as if, science has gone off on this horrible tack, and that 2,000 years ago, from a natural scientist perspective, we were more advanced than we are today, which is bizarre.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with you. But the one thing that I would kind of try to influence a change of view on is well, okay, is the AI, is the artificial development, is the mechanization of things, robotics and what have you, and our integration into that, is it horrible, or is it simply part of the universal process that goes on all the time, which is the universe trying to explore and understand itself? Now, you as a writer, when you're writing a novel, you introduce new characters, new situations to change the protagonist's viewpoint and their trajectory through the novel. Fundamentally, that's what's happening here, is that we've got this period of change and development that has been introduced by the management, because the management is in control of everything, right? I mean, we cannot talk about what we've been talking about and say that the management is not in control. It is.
Yeah.
So we have free will, right? But okay. So what's happening is that as science, so as a part of the collective is going off and looking at all of the power of this materialist viewpoint, the other part of humanity is going, oh, hang on, no, look at this, look at your heart, look at the truth, look at how you're connected in the natural world already. Look at that. Now, the irony is that for the robotics to develop and the AI to develop, they've had to look at this, the spiritual, to the what is it that makes our reality. And that's where a lot of the discoveries are being made for neuroscientists about the way that we absolutely do individually create our reality and experience it in such uniqueness. And we are effectively walking around in our own little bubble universe. They've had to do that and to understand that, because in a way what they're trying to do is to reverse engineer consciousness so they can put consciousness into robotics. They haven't done that, and science does not understand what consciousness is anywhere near. They are nowhere near understanding what it is. Now, there are the hope in all of this, and the reason I can feel so hopeful about the future, because I do feel hopeful about it, is that there is a massive section of science and scientists that actually come at it all from the non-materialist perspective. So we've got people like Dr. Amit Goswami, who wrote The Self-Aware Universe, deeply spiritual guy, brilliant scientists. We've got other scientists like, I can't remember their names now, but there's loads of scientists who actually get and understand the non-materialist perspective from which to look at everything. Now, those scientists, I mean, bless him, people like Nassim Haramein. I mean, he's working amazingly well on resonance and that sort of thing, and that all stems from a spiritual perspective. Those are our hope, because it won't stop the robotics and the AI taking place, but what it will do is that it allows a balance to be achieved in the future. And like I say, and as you recognize, we are going through a period of change, and that's why the chaos is here. And that chaos may well, we may not outlive the period of chaos, you and I as human beings, but it will change and it will settle down. It will open into a new era of humanity understanding what it is. And that's where we're going. So that's all good and positive. But the crucial thing is, the absolutely crucial thing is, and this comes right back to earth energy and to the house healing modality as well, if you like, the most important thing is to understand that our role as a human being, so we bring it right down to the human perspective, is to recognize that we are constantly making choices in ourselves, in how we feel, in how we react to other people, in how we react to the environment, in how even stupid things like, even how do I feel about this pen? Do I really like this pen? Yeah, I do actually really quite like that pen. I think that's a clever bit of engineering. It's a very simple, very cheap pen. It's a collection of atoms, but I like it, which means my heart feels good. Now, if my wife were to walk in right now, I would be a little bit annoyed because we're in the middle of a podcast. But fundamentally, I love my wife, and my wife makes me feel really, really good because I love her so much. Now, these are choices. These are all choices that we are either making subconsciously or consciously. It's our ability to make conscious choices which affects our experience of reality. The mechanism of reality being created is through earth energy, constant paradoxical feedback loops all the time. So in making choices of what we believe in, it forms our reality individually, and then obviously collectively. And so that's exactly what you're saying just now about where we're headed, AI, what's going on, what are the choices that we're making. But if we individually make a choice, we act in recognition that that choice also counts, because it counts the shared experience of the reality, then we have a power, we have a way forward.
Yeah, most of AI, as we're exposed to it on an everyday sort of basis, I heard described extremely well as just clever plagiarism.
Yeah.
And I actually like that because, yeah, it is. It's just it's just intelligent plagiarism.
Yeah.
At this point in time, and I just, my reaction to like all of that is to find it distasteful. But I understand that it plays a role in the broader scope of things, that we react and respond to these stimuli, and it makes us do things and think things and feel things that we learn from. So it's a it's a sort of it's the polarity thing at work. It's the law of the triangle in magic. It's the two basal points resolve to a common point, and that's what's important.
Yeah.
And but my personal feelings are that there's a degree of automism building within humanity, part of humanity as a whole, and that results in narratives and the horrible word sheeple and people forcing other people to do things they don't want to do because the narrative. It's all the same. It's all the same thing at work, just a different manifestation of it.
Yeah, at the moment, what we are seeing is that the AI and that development and all of that is being used in ways that are quite alarming. But as you'll recognize, really, these things are alarming, these external influences, because much of it is being steered by governmental control and all the rest of it. And the idea of the whole, 1984 scenario taking place as it is now is pretty horrific. But these are influences, in the most basic terms, good and bad. And at the moment, we say from our subjective awareness as human beings that these things are bad, because there is certainly, I think, anything that limits the freedom of the population in such a way as is being suggested right now is a bad thing, because it makes them completely powerless. And that's, people are not going to stand for it.
No, it drives an equal and opposite response. And so the harder people, governments and centralized forces push, the harder individuals push back. Yeah. And what it's meaning, I think that this is also contributing to the growth of things like house healing and understanding that this has relevance and importance and there's a need for it. So I think it's part of the grand design.
It is.
It's uncomfortable, particularly if you like me and have quite strong opinions about personal freedom and liberty. Yeah. But it's happening for a reason, and I agree with you completely on that.
Yeah, I think it's either going to head towards a modern equivalent of the what was it, Peasants' Revolt was it? I can't remember, where they destroyed the looms or something. My history is not good.
The Luddites,
yeah, the Luddite uprising. That'll be it. We'll see where it goes. But I think the thing is that so many people feel that they are living in a world that they have no power in. They can't affect things, and they feel like they are completely out of control, and they're out of control of their lives, and they're just rather at sea. And as you say, that's symptomatic of the change and of the period that we're living in. But it's not a quick fix, but what we've been talking about today is definitely a way to find some peace and contentment within this modern environment and in this world. There's no doubt about that. Whether we choose to help other people through the mechanism, something like house healing or not, is entirely up to us, and that's how we individually deal with that responsibility is also up to us. And it's an individual journey. And the really significant but very, very, very simple fact is this point that it's so simple that it's just ridiculously stupid. But the point being that our choice, when I talk about how we react to things, our choice, that's our power. That power to work from the heart is so important, to recognize that actually the next moment will be changed by your reaction in this moment, literally moment by moment, nanosecond by nanosecond. Mm-hmm. So your reality is formed from those mindful choices. If we throw up our hands and run to the hills screaming, then your reality is full of that kind of chaos and powerlessness.
Well, you probably saw me sort of frowning a little, because I started to really see the analogy between your lexicon and mine, and I saw how they were almost the same or identical, in fact, because what I've been talking about recently is that the forces seem to be trying to push inhumanity, and humanity, what makes us human, is under threat.
Yeah.
And my advice to people has been recognizing that they're trying to decrease our humanity. The thing we need to be more is more human.
Yes.
And in order to be more human, the only thing I can suggest to you is get out your house, get into nature and experience connecting with the planet, or be creative, art, music, whatever, and experience your creativity. And in doing so, what you're doing is you're becoming more human again, and you're responding to this push to be a machine by saying, no, I'm human. And in fact, I want to be more human. I don't want to be a machine.
I think I completely agree with you, as you would expect. I would just say, I don't think it's or be creative, as you described it there. I think it's and. Yeah, you got to, because the creativity is innately human. Everybody is creative. That's what we've been talking about, is the creation of our reality. We are creative beings. Look, you could write a really good novel about, and it's probably a Doctor Who story really, but it's like about the species that creates the reality for other species, right? Now that species would be really important. Well, we are that species. We do create a reality in which other beings exist and live and have a sentience. If we weren't here as human beings, a vibration of reality wouldn't exist. Right? That's a significant species.
It's funny because a few years ago I was trying to explain this idea of create your own reality and how your knowing yourself has an impact on that. And I don't know, but I came up with this thing because I'd been reading on Facebook in the Brno pages a person that was like, what the hell's going on with the supermarkets? There's nothing there. I can't find any bread. There's very little meat and so on and so forth. And I said, well, that's funny because when I go to the supermarket, it's filled with bread and choice of food and things. And then I realized, what's going on here is you're going to the supermarket with the expectation it doesn't have anything, and I'm going to the supermarket with the expectation that it does. So we're actually creating two different realities, although we're sharing the same reality.
This is one of the things that became really, really, really clear when I started doing the house healing was, and this is what I teach in the course, is that what we're doing when we're helping people is we're accessing an entirely different universe. We're going into that person's universe with all of their expectations and all of their creative ability, moment by moment, into the world that they are living in and creating themselves. It's not to say that they are the only creative force in their universe or in our universe, but the key word that you used there was expectation. And that's a really, really precise word to use in this manifesting process, because we've been taught for years, decades now, that, oh yes, you focus in and you create your own reality and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, so you can deliberately work with it with intention and all the rest of it and blah, 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 great. But the real power is in that subconscious expectation. That's the key word. It's also a word that was used by the brilliant channel, as far as I'm concerned. I think he's the best channel there is. Paul Selig, fantastic channeler of brilliant books. If you've never read any, do dive into them. Maybe even start at the one, Book of Innocence, which is a great one to read, quite accessible. But his guides talk about expectation, understanding of how that reality is experienced. It's not about us as individual blobby human beings. It's about the vibration that exists. And our life is not, let's forget about using this word life. It's experience. Experience changes moment to moment to moment. And we have a huge control over that. And
what's really weird, what's really weird is that I know this, you know this. I don't know if you have the same issue, but I find that people around me are constantly reminding me of my own failings, that I know it, but I don't practice it. My daughter, she said to me the other day, she said, Dad, why do you say you can't find a woman? You'll never find one if you say you can't. My Czech teacher says, stop saying you can't speak Czech. You never will if you say that. And I'm thinking to myself, hang on a minute. Are these individuals telling me something, or is this the universe manifesting a message back to me that I need to learn, which is, Gary, you know this, stop it.
I think there's the lesson of acceptance, though. I really do, because I think we have to accept that we are fundamentally human. And being human also means that we're fallible. We look, we're in a process of learning and understanding and learning how to live with the new concepts, because the concept that we talked about today is absolutely a fundamental shift of paradigm. It's a 180 degrees, or whatever you want to call it. It's a complete turn on its head paradigm from which to live. You can't just simply adopt that. I have exactly the same circumstance. I finish sitting at my desk of a day and go and join up with my wife. We might sit outside in the lovely sunshine and enjoy the countryside and have a drink or something. But I then go into a rant of moaning about bloody Facebook and trying to work out why doesn't it do such and such, and why the hell does it do that, and I hate Facebook and all of that. And she's just like, yeah, you're never going to get it to work if you're doing that. And it's exactly the same, because hey, we're human. These things are really annoying. But again, it's that energy of choice. So what do? Do I not express myself as a human being? No, you can't. You got to express yourself. You got to be you. That's the point. Yeah.
You got to learn. And it always amuses me at the end of the day that when I was a boy, I asked my old dad, a few questions, and I forget the question that I asked, but the answer, it was about parking the car. And the answer was, well, I never have a problem parking the car because I always expect there to be a free space. He knew it.
He knew it anyway. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, brilliant. I was watching the British National Television Awards last night, and there was an award for a newcomer, and this young lad, he was probably very early 20s, got up on stage to accept his award. And the speech he gave was amazing, because he not only thanked all the usual, producers and the cast and all the rest of it for accepting him, but he also said, and I thank this part of me in here, and that we've all got it. We've all got it. Every one of us in this room have got this. It's this thing that knows that we're far more than what we seem to be. And it was these little moments of like, hey, I was like, dear God, he's got it. That's brilliant. And that's a generation that's coming through.
Yeah.
They innately understand, I mean, my youngest, who wants to do the house healing, he's 30. Generations below him have got the understanding down to a T. They just need the fine tuning of his sort of generation. You know what I mean?
And it seems, judging from what I'm hearing, anecdotally anyway, is that generation is also pushing back against the narrative and saying,
yeah,
rubbish.
But
that's good.
Yeah, but don't forget, the narrative is there because we believe it's there.
Agreed. Agreed. And it's hard, isn't it? It's hard. It's always a dilemma whether to point something out, because, as I've always said, I wrote a book called The New You, How to Create Your Own Reality. And one of the things I said was, be careful what you give your attention to.
Yes.
And, if you start giving your attention to something like the narrative, then it becomes real, even if it wasn't before.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things about the narrative is that it's, we have to understand that organizations, and that goes for a small company of 10 people trying to get its message out, or, marketing, through to governments, and unfortunately, even the bloody WEF. They all have communications experts. Those communications experts are the ones that sit there and say, right, this is the narrative we're going to follow. This is how we're going to present things. And my God, the narrative of the COVID, let's not get into the COVID thing, but the COVID pandemic was a prime example of how the narrative became a thing of its own, and people, they in charge, stuck to it like effing glue, despite so much evidence to the contrary. And now look where we are with stuff. But again, this is only my story. This is my interpretation of the way that I react to it. And story, I mean, again, we could spend a whole hour talking about the importance of story in the structure of reality and what we experience. We just have to be we have to be a little bit mindful and a little bit kind of aware of the humanity that actually creates the narrative, because I could feel really really up against the mainstream medical profession because of how things transpired over those few years of the pandemic. But let's accept the fact that my local GP, for example, I mean, he's a lovely guy. He's just trying to do his job and work his way through whatever he's doing and get through life, understand. Just unfortunately, because he's in a position where he's following instructions from an authority that, as far as I'm concerned, is completely wrong, then, it's not my place to judge him as being the baddie. So we have to be a little bit careful of how we judge others.
Right. With that, let's come to a close, because I know that I want to make sure that people know about your house healing services and classes. How can they sign up?
Contact me through my website, which is www.knightsrose.com. That's KNIGHTSROSE.com, knightsrose.com. We are actually starting the next course in September, the back end of September. So if anybody wants to come on board, or is interested in the idea of coming on board and wants to have a quick 30-minute chat with me, I do like to talk to everybody that wants to come on board, because I like to establish that we're a good fit and that what we go through is relevant to that person, that they're ready for it. But yeah, drop me a line, get in touch ASAP, because we're going to be starting without you, and I'm not going to be doing this forever.
Great, Tim, thanks a lot. It's been great.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks, Gary.